Okay, so welcome to today's event. I'm Dr. Binita Kane. I'm co-founder of South Asian Heritage Month and co-chair of the South Asian Heritage Trust charity, which hosts the month. Want to welcome you all and thank you for attending this event, which is on the important topic of organ donation in South Asian communities, which we bring to you in collaboration with APNA, NHS, and also NHS Blood and Transplant. And thanks to everyone who's worked really hard behind the scenes to pull this together. I'll be introducing our host, Habib Naqvi, in just a moment, who will give more background on why we are here today discussing this. But just wanted to take the opportunity to say that we are 2 weeks into South Asian Heritage Month. It continues to run until the 17th of August. And our theme this year is Roots, R-O-O-T-S, to Roots, R-O-U-T-E-S, where we've come from to where we're going. And there's plenty of time to still get involved. You can find more information about what's going on, as well as access to our toolkits and other resources on our website, which is southasianheritage.org.uk. Importantly, our work extends beyond just the month, and we have a year-round goal of working on health inequalities, including our organ donation work. And this year, we've appointed a new NHS and health inequalities lead, Riyadul Karim, to deepen our commitment to that. So we're really excited about working with him. We'd love you to participate in the session. So please do drop your thoughts and questions into the chat, and you will have an opportunity for those to be answered as we go through. We'll be keeping an eye. We are recording the event, so please be mindful of that if you're sharing anything personal. And it would be lovely to see your faces if anyone felt comfortable having their cameras on. But understand that some of you might be munching your lunch, so also it's fine to leave them switched off. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our host, Dr. Habib Naqvi, MBE, to our South Asian Heritage Month panel on organ donation, someone I've personally been admiring from afar for a very long time now, Habib. He's the Chief Executive of the NHS Race and Health Observatory and a leading voice and light on tackling health inequalities, particularly in minority ethnic communities. He's spent much of his career championing this cause and has previously led the NHS Workforce Race Equality Standards Programme. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Habib Naqvi. We're really honoured to have you here today. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Binita. And it's great to be with you all, and some very familiar faces or names I can certainly see in the chat. And as Binita rightly says, South Asian Heritage Month is every day of the year for us, and particularly during these few weeks, it's an opportunity as well for us to both celebrate the rich identities, cultures, and contributions of South Asian communities, and also to reflect, connect, and move forward with some of the deep-seated challenges that we have around ethnic and racial inequalities in health. And as Binita said, the theme for 2025 is Roots to Roots. And this invites us to reflect on the journeys around migration and heritage, adaptation that help to shape who we are, but also the society that we live in. Today's webinar is focusing on the challenges and opportunities associated with organ donation. And I guess there are very few more meaningful or life-changing journeys than choosing to give or receive the gift of life through organ donation. So this is a particularly important and pertinent webinar for us. And whilst we know that there are inequalities in donation, and having led the Race and Health Observatory, I know that the inequalities that we see in organ donation are one of the stark inequities across kind of all domains or all topics for us. But we also know that true empowerment does lead to health equity, and yet for South Asian communities, access to donation, the trust in our system, in our NHS, and the health outcomes remain unfairly imbalanced. So this is important. It's important because we know South Asian people in the UK are often more likely to need organ transplants due to their higher risk of conditions such as diabetes and kidney disease, and yet are significantly less likely to become donors. And despite South Asians making up nearly 8 to 9% of the UK population, only around 3% of organ donors are from Asian backgrounds. So bridging this gap is really important, and bridging the gap really does start with conversations grounded in lived experience, conversations that are informed by faith and culture and backed by data. And those are the conversations we're going to have today with our esteemed guests. And South Asian Heritage Month presents an ideal moment to center those voices of people directly impacted, those who face the challenges, and of course, those who are striving to drive positive change in this area. And we can only change outcomes by changing understanding. And so these conversations that we're about to have now will help us to light the path towards reducing the inequalities and improving the lives of the people that we live with and we're here to serve as NHS staff as well. So we have three esteemed guests on the webinar today. We have Mahmud Nawaz, who is a chair at Chesterfield Royal Hospital NHS Foundation Trust, and also, I'm pleased to say, chair designate at Sheffield Teaching Hospital, and is very quickly, hopefully, due to be the first chair of a Shelford Group NHS Trust, which is a huge achievement when it comes to breaking down barriers and glass ceilings for Black, minority, ethnic, Asian staff working in the NHS. So Mahmud, we will come to you in a moment to talk a little bit more about donor family experience. The other two guests that we have are Professor Gurch Randhawa, who is Professor of Diversity and Public Health at the University of Bedfordshire, who will share data, information, and insight around this topic. And we also have Ekta Marwaha, who will be presenting the living donor experience, which is critical. And when it comes to tackling inequalities, what we've learned over the last few years, particularly post-pandemic, is the importance of co-design in terms of delivery of services. So it'll be really important to have that conversation with Ekta around the lived experience aspect of this important topic. So if I can begin, firstly with Mahmud, a conversation with Mahmud around your family experience, Mahmud, on donation, and what were those moments like for you, I guess?
Thank you, Habib, and hi everyone. Really pleased to be here. Yeah, to make it a little bit personal, I mean, this is the picture of myself and my wife Sharon. We got married in 2002, in October 2002, and very sadly she died of a brain hemorrhage in March 2004. It's my first experience of death as well, and I have to say, as a South Asian person, we're not very good at talking about death. But I was really lucky. She actually had talked to me about organ donation. I knew that she wanted to be an organ donor. She carried a card since the age of 16. And as I say, she died in 2004, aged 32, and I was 33. And you can see how scary marriage is by the look on my face on that picture as well. I thought she'd had I thought she'd fainted. She collapsed in the shower, and I went to find her, called 999, ambulance came really quickly in 8 minutes, so it tells you how long ago it was. And off we went to Bradford Royal Infirmary, Habib, and this was my first experience really of A&E in a serious way for the NHS, and they told me there was nothing they could really do, and had I considered organ donation. Had she not had that conversation with me, I would have said no, I think, because when you're in that kind of traumatic shock, you can't process something extra to think about, and you're in a daze. You're in shock. And I almost went into autopilot because I knew that she wanted to be an organ donor, and she talked to me about it. And as a result of that, she went on to save 4 lives, including a little boy of 1.5, who wouldn't have made it to 2 without the smaller part of her liver. Her 2 kidneys and her liver into two parts were donated. That's all that they could donate, given the length of time it had taken to be recovered in A&E and then ICU. But that I was very grateful for that opportunity, the legacy for her, and I knew that was something that she really wanted to do. But it's not only just changed my life, Habib, as you know. Sorry, not just changed the lives of the 4 people. It's changed my life as well. It's created a link to NHSBT. In fact, UK Transplant. I'm that old. Originally UK Transplant before it became NHSBT. My links have started 21 years ago, and they've continued, and I'm really proud to say I'm an ambassador for NHSBT for organ donation now. I've sat on the organ donation committee of 2 trusts, and and that's led me to become a non-exec director at Mid Yorkshire, and now chair at Chesterfield Roll, and as you say, soon to be chair at Sheffield Teaching as well. So I'm very grateful that despite the lack of discussion of death, despite the lack of preparedness that we all have in our communities, my wife prepared me. She left me certain of her wishes. I knew what to say, and I'd really recommend people just leaving their loved ones certain in that same way, because if you don't know what to do, you're going to typically say no, and you're putting that stress of making that choice on your loved ones when you're gone. It's much better to prepare them for that shock, and let them know. In our communities, as you rightly say, we're twice as likely to need a transplant and half as likely to say yes to deceased donation. And so South Asians wait on average 4 months longer for a kidney. And people are dying. It's a real health inequality, Habib, that I think we can all tackle for free by having a conversation. That's all it takes. So I think for me, this is mission for me now to try and encourage people not to say yes, but to make an informed decision. Even if that's a yes or a no, it doesn't matter. Make a decision, tell your family, and record it on the organ donor register.
And Mahmud, thank you firstly for sharing your story, and also thank you for the work that you have been doing and are doing in this space as well. And if it's okay, just to go back a little bit and get your experience, I guess, of the support, emotional, cultural, practical, I guess, that you received during the process. Are there any reflections on that?
Yeah, it was really difficult. I'm a Londoner. This happened in Bradford. So from a family perspective, it was a little bit isolating for me. I had a lot of my wife's family in the room, but their view was you're next to kin. You're the decision maker. That's very isolating as a feeling. And what got me through it, if I'm really honest, was a chap that many people in HSBT, I suspect, will know, called Sean Willis, and he was my transplant coordinator. And he was the person that came to first talk to me about organ donation. And he was the one who sat with me. He was the one who talked me through what was going to happen, and metaphorically held my hand for the 36 hours that I was in hospital. what I found, and it's the bit that's changed in me, is I found such compassionate care, not just from him, but from people in A&E that looked after me, and people in ICU when the body was moved to be warmed up for organ donation. Those little moments of compassionate care have always stayed with me and made me want to give back, really. And that got me through, Habib, in terms of just being able to have someone there to understand the process, help me through the process, and talk to me and reassure me that this was a good thing to be doing. Because you do have the doubt, even though I knew this is what she wanted. You question yourself. You're not in a fit state of mind when you're in that kind of traumatic shock to make rational decisions, and having that support is so vital to get you through it. I've always felt that one of the things I would have loved to have had is being able to talk to someone like me after the event, to know that it was worth doing. And that's hard to engineer, I appreciate that, but actually you really want that reassurance that
Yes.
you made the right decision and that you're making the right decision.
And that brings me on to the other question I had in mind, was the level of support, I guess, again, cultural, practical, etc., emotional, in the weeks, months, and I guess years that have followed on from that moment.
Yeah, I think I found a lot of personal management of the making sense of it through being involved in organ donation, being able to tell my story and encourage others to make an informed decision. I genuinely felt grateful that she told me what she wanted for herself, because I then didn't have to make that choice. So she made life so much easier for me by making that choice for me, and I wanted people to understand that. I think as well, the support I got, particularly back then, from a lovely lady who I'm still friends with called Jane Fisher, who worked at NHSBT. She was the Yorkshire team manager for organ donation for this, what's now called the specialist nurses for organ donation. She brought me into the fold. She spent time with me. She encouraged me to talk about my story. I got real support from people in organ donation, because it's, I lost my wife age 33. I was a widow age 33, and Widowed and Young, another charity that I've been a part of, was a really big support for me too. But I got support from Sean, my transplant coordinator, for another 6 months after this had happened. This wasn't transactional. This was genuine support from my colleagues and friends involved in organ donation, beyond the actual death of my wife as well.
And that sustained level of support is so important, I guess, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we've all got a personal story, no matter what it is. And I think, for me, I've made the choice to say I've got some lived experience. How can I use that positively to make a difference? And that's the way I try to honor her life, not her death, but her life. She was a blood donor. She was O neg, O negative, so she gave blood very regularly. She wanted to be an organ donor. And that little boy of 1.5 that I talked about, who got his gift of life in 2004, I met him in May 2025, just a couple of months ago, in Sheffield, and that was an amazing experience, to that long after, to see what difference it had made, and hearing his parents telling me that for their 1.5-year-old they were preparing his funeral, and that how a liver transplant got rid of that yellow colour that he had in St James's hospital, and he was able to be discharged just 2 weeks after the transplant, and that their whole family had been split up. The mum and the little boy living in St James's in Leeds, and the dad and the 2 twins living in Sheffield, and that had been going on for months. And then this miracle came to save him and to save their lives. And it was, as you can probably imagine, a very emotional experience. But that's the legacy. That's the power of organ donation. That's the power of the gift of life.
Absolutely, a miracle and a gift, as you say, Mahmud. Mahmud, one final question: what would you want other South Asian families to know about being on the donor side, especially those that may feel uncertain about donating organs. And I know you've got your slide up as well.
Yeah, those are the three things for everyone. But what I would say specifically is this isn't about making people say yes. This is about people making an informed decision. And as you said, you know, we are less likely to say yes as a South Asian community, and we are more likely to need a transplant, and therefore we are more likely to die waiting. And you know, across all our communities, particularly in South Asian Heritage Month, we have such a generosity of community spirit in the South Asian community. This is about saying yes is about helping your own community because of the tissue and blood matching that's required to make an organ donation really work. So by saying yes, you're helping your own community. And there is so much information. You've rightly said ethnicity and religion come into this. And on that website, organdonation.nhs.uk, there are some really good resources on ethnicity and on religion to make an informed decision. I'm a Muslim, I'm Bangladeshi as well. There's a bit of the Quran that says, he who saves the life of one man, it's as if he saved the life of all mankind. And that's what organ donation, that's what altruistic organ donation is about for me. So that's what I'd encourage people to do. Make that informed decision. Tell your family. That's such a hard conversation for us, but waving an organ donor card in someone's face is quite an easy way to broach the subject. This is what I stand for, and then record it on the organ donor register, which you can do on the NHS app now. It just takes a couple of clicks as well. So it's really easy. And as I say, it's a health inequality we can all solve for free by just having a chat.
Great. Thank you, Mahmud. Thank you so much for sharing your story, emotional and inspirational at the same time as well. So thank you, Mahmud. We will come back to questions and answers at the end. So for those listening in, please do drop your questions in the chat box function. Where you can, please do a highlight who you want that question asked to. But we will, if it's okay, Mahmud, we will go on to the next presenter. We have Professor Gurch Randhawa from the University of Bedfordshire, who will be looking to share some statistics, some data, insight, and I guess, Gurch, highlighting the scale of the challenge that we have.
Yeah, so precisely that. So firstly, a huge thank you to the organisers for inviting me to share this platform. I mean, it's truly a privilege to join Mahmud, who's just spoken so great about Sharon and his journey, and also, as you'll hear from Ekta, I mean, so these donor stories are essentially the things that we need to normalise, and I want to sort of set out the reasons why. Just to stress, I'm going to do these slides at pace because Habib is trying to keep me to time, which means that if you want my slides, just put in the chat your contact details. I will email them to anybody. So hopefully these slides are moving now. So one of the key things I want to stress is organ donation is one part of a systemic issue. So the key thing I want us to not lose sight of is the proportion of minority communities are actually on the waiting list. So this is the data in the UK, and essentially it shows nearly 1 in 3 people waiting for a transplant from a minority background, yet we only make up 18% of the population. So I would say this as a public health professor, but there's a lot more we need to do in terms of prevention, treatment and management of long-term conditions. And we really don't want to lose sight of that because we are, as minority communities, a rapidly aging population. And if we're not careful, that waiting list figure is only going to go upwards, which is not good news. So I just want to sort of emphasize that, as well as the issues around organ donation. So in the UK, we're unique in the fact that we've got 2 registers. We've got an opt-in register, well, one register where you can either opt in or opt out. And here are some of the dilemmas that we're faced with. So if you look at the opt-in register, minority communities are underrepresented. On the opt-out register, we are overrepresented, and when we look at eligible donors, we're underrepresented. But and thanks to some of the amazing scientific progress we've made in this country, led by NHS Blood and Transplant, we're able to get a lot of people transplanted. So if you look at the proportion of transplants, a lot of the communities do well. Living donors for improvement do. So it's a systemic issue that we need to sort of think of. And as Mahmud kindly highlighted, there are some other inequalities. So obviously in Mahmud's case, he and Sharon spoke about the issue. So I'm not saying it was an easy decision, but it may have been easier to think about those issues because families have discussed it. But there are variations in consent rates for organ donation based on ethnicity, and we need to again think about this because it's nearly a twofold difference, and that then impacts on waiting times. So although they're falling, we've got room for progress. And I think just to sort of stress that I'm only going to talk today about the sort of public engagements aspects, but actually there's a lot more to this. We've got to think about how we constantly improve our management of long-term conditions. How do we improve transplant services? How do we embed workforce diversity? How do we embed cultural safety and make sure that staff training is offered as sort of mandatory in these areas? And research needs to be far more inclusive than it currently is. We're making progress, but there's a lot more we need to do. And if you think about what people say, and Mahmud again talked about this, when you speak to different communities, so we've done research in many different minority communities, actually their concerns are quite legitimate. So the first quote I share with you here was actually said to me, so I remember it vividly. So we were talking about organ donation, and this gentleman said to me, "Oh, you found me now, you need my organs. Where were you when I had the high blood pressure, diabetes, and kidney disease?" And actually, that's a really good, valid point, that as a system, we're not always good at approaching people along the whole pathway, and we've got to do better. And some people worry that doctors would finish them off before they were dead, and we know that's not true. But if that's people's concerns, we need to address them. So that's a reason why some people may not join the organ donor register. Other people think about religion. Other people think about life after death, and that's sort of feeding into a lot of the training that I've been privileged to support NHS Blood and Transplant with, where we're talking to staff about how do you surface these issues and how do we reassure patients that discrimination and racism won't occur during the process of organ donation. How do we explain to people how the burial and cremation rites will be impacted? And we've got to be honest. So if we know that the process is going to take longer, we need to tell people that yes, that could take longer, but actually that could mean more time with your loved one to say goodbye as well. So some families don't always perceive that as a negative. And again, we need to think about religion. So what we've been trying to do and working with mainly people who've been impacted by organ donation is now to sort of normalize these conversations in terms of public engagement and really focusing on the story like Mahmoud's just shared, and I know Ekta will share. And these are just that sort of journey that we've gone on. So these are about working with living kidney donors, donor families, communities. And we're really lucky in the UK. We're the only country that still has produced a faith and organ donation action plan back in 2013. Many countries now sort of shamelessly borrow from this, but it's something we need to do more of. And many people have supported the sort of faith engagement. We're doing lots of work in schools. Many of you will know fantastic family, James and Patel, whose son Ari died, and they donated his organs. And this was an event at cricket a few years back. I thought it was a shame, despite many of us lobbying the powers that be in the cricket world this year, we didn't manage to pull it off again. But, if you can normalise the visibility of donor families from every background at large events when media are present, the public are present, then you really do start to show people that organ donation is actually things that everybody engages with. The gentleman on the left of this image is Bobby Mudar. His brother Mandeep Mudar passed away and donated his organs, and he stood here with a politician when they launched their organ donation toolkit, and his family quite rightly received His Majesty's Queen's Award for Voluntary Service for all the fantastic work they do in championing this work. And again, I think credit where credit's due. NHS Blood and Transplant have found the resources to invest in a community investment scheme, which has now become the Community Grants Programme. It's been running now for nearly 7 years. And what's so joyous about this is it's truly a national endeavour, reaching different communities. Again, the question I would ask is, we need to evaluate and learn what's working well, and also what's not gone so well, so that we make sure we use best value resources going forward. And I think the thing to stress, and people may be noticing this across the UK, we're human creatures, so we will constantly always move around. If you go back to history, that's what we do. Despite what politicians say, we as humans will always move around the world. And this is going to impact not just on the UK, but the whole of Europe, as more and more people from Asia and Africa reach the continent. And that's why I think we've got to think about the UK's leadership role, really, because we are ahead of the curve on dealing with some of these issues, how we can support our European partners. And some of us to do that is, again, really honoured to have worked with colleagues at the Al-Mahdi Institute who led the publication of this book, Organ Donation in Islam. And what's so unique about this book is it's got differences with different interpretations of Islam and organ donation. And that's what's been so successful with this book, because many countries now are using it as a toolkit, because it doesn't only adopt one position, i.e. it doesn't just say organ donation is a good thing. It also makes arguments about some interpretations which may consider it as not something to do, but at least people can make those informed decisions by reading these texts. I'm really pleased in the UK we've sort of tried to transcend politics with organ donation. So I think the establishment of an all-party parliamentary group for ethnicity transplantation and transfusion is really important for the journey. And I think the first report, Where Are NHS Donors, asks this really pertinent question, which obviously, we've got Mahmud and Ekta here today, but we need to hear these stories far more visibly. And here's examples. So the Hospital Arts Studio, who are based in Leeds, are doing some fantastic work on developing pieces of art for organ donation. I've just managed to connect them with Binita and who've agreed to work with them and co-design with local communities to produce a piece of art. And once it's ready and commissioned, it will be installed in a public space in Leeds as a diverse town. And I think by having it in a public space where there's lots of footfall, again, it will stimulate conversations around organ donation. That's what we need to do, just bringing that great visibility. And just to sort of share with you as a sort of finish up, really delighted that the Vatican, who have the Pontifical Academy for Life, are also showing some leadership on this. So the Pontifical Academy for Life now in England and is able to just mobilise different faith groups from around the world. That gravitas. So they've launched this Deliver project, which is around donation, ethnicity, liberty and inclusion via religious communities. And it's just bringing people together. And it's really remarkable the power that has of bringing people from different continents who are all giving thought to how do we give greater visibility to the donor story. That's so important. So my sort of closing reflections are this really is about where are our donors? And obviously, it's fantastic they're here on this and talk today. We need to think about, are the messengers and what's the message? And I would argue changing the donor stories really. And going back to my opening slide, I think this is a systemic issue. So I do have a question about, should we not also be talking to communities about prevention, management, and treatment, as well as issues like end-of-life care and donation? And we need to think about the different dimensions of our communities. We've got faith leaders, we've got faith media, we've got celebrities, musicians, medical schools, organ donation committees. I don't think anybody should be absent from this list. If anything, this list needs to get bigger and larger. And I think if we really want organ donation to be a normal conversation, we should expect everybody in every part of our society to have this conversation. And I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gurch, for highlighting the challenges, but also for outlining how data can challenge some of those stereotypes and those challenges as well. And we'll come on, I'm sure there'll be some questions in the chat box, and we'll come on to those. But before we do that, I'd like to go to Ekta, if that's okay, and speak with Ekta about the kind of the lived experience of organ donation. And I guess, Ekta, if I can begin with a question around what motivated you to become a living donor, and the type of responses you got from your family and wider community as part of that process. So over to Ekta.
Okay, so I am a living donor for my father. So I donated to him in 2021, so 4 years ago now. I suppose the motivation came because as part of his journey, we had a conversation with, my dad had kidney functioning. He'd been checked for a number of years, but it stayed quite stable. And at the point that it had got to a stage where they thought they might have to do a transplant, they had brought us in to have a conversation to see what his options would be. Right from the outset, they had kind of said his chances of getting, based on age, based on ethnicity, the chances of him getting a donation at this age are going to be very unlikely. And with his South Asian heritage, being Hindu Punjabi, that was even less likely. So they had kind of recommended the best option would be living donation. So for me at that point, it was me, my mum and my brother in the room, and my brother was ruled out immediately because he's got lupus, so he wouldn't have been in a position to donate. So my motivation came, I suppose, specifically in relation to wanting to donate because my dad needed a kidney donation. And at that point, I didn't say anything in the room. I kind of went away and researched myself into what that would mean for me. I spoke to the transplant clinic at that point without my dad kind of knowing, without the family kind of knowing, because I wanted to do as much research before I said it might be an option. My dad found out quite later on that I'd done a lot of that. I suppose what made our process a lot longer was COVID came in between. So he probably would have got his transplant in 2020, early 2020, but COVID kind of interfered. So we had to wait until the transplant unit was open. I suppose once I'd made the decision that I was going to go ahead with the transplant, I suppose a lot of the negativity I got from family, extended family, lots of misconceptions in terms of you can't donate to your father, you're a girl donating to your father, in terms of kind of cultural issues. Why should a daughter donate to her father? You're going to go on, you're going to be someone else's responsibility in terms of marriage. There was lots of misconceptions about me not being able to have another child if I wanted to. So there was lots of things that came into play, to the extent that some family members were like, you shouldn't be doing it. And they'd had conversations with my dad to have with me to talk me out of donating a kidney, but not being based on any informed information. It was all mythical information, nothing that was actually factual. But at least I was able to go back to them and say, if I want to have children, I can have children. There's nothing wrong with me being a female and donating to my father. For me, it was about giving him that gift of life, that extension of life. He was a big part of our family unit, extended family unit. And I kind of had in my head, kind of having had a grandfather who had gone through kidney failure as well, was on dialysis for many, many years. They didn't find a donor for him in the end, and he passed away whilst waiting. So we had had similar experiences in the family. So I had kind of known at that stage, this was potentially the only option. Was it the best option for us as a family? 100%. My dad's 4 years down the line, much more mobile. He was up out of the bed within a few hours of the kidney transplant. I was in the bed, lying, not moving, but he was the complete opposite. And that for me was enough. He's still around. He's still a big part of our lives. So yeah, so that was my kind of motivation. It was keeping him here for a wee bit longer. And if I was able to offer that gift when it was actually having no implications in my life. And I think I've already instilled that even within my own daughter, that the importance of donation. We have conversations about it even now, 4 years down the line. So yeah, it was a motivation, I suppose, due to need at that point, and knowing that my dad was not going to get a transplant off the donor list potentially anytime soon. And he went on dialysis only for a short period of time, and I couldn't wait for the transplant unit to open back up so that we could progress with the donation, because it took so much out of him, so much out of his life in terms of his ability, in terms of him moving about. He was quite a social person. So a lot of it was down to that, I suppose. Yes, like I'm saying, there was lots of misconceptions, lots of family kind of tell her she shouldn't be doing this, rather than actually going, well, it's my choice.
And if I can ask a question just on that, Ekta, because it's amazing that you were able then to see him get up and walk around, as you say, within hours of the organ transplant operation. What was the response of the family afterwards, having seen the success of this organ donation process?
I think I got lots of thank yous, and I think this isn't about thank you. This was about saving his life for me. Yes, people have now kind of looked and gone, yes, that is a good option. Like I'm saying, potentially half my family would not be able to donate, just down to all the different ailments that hinder that process in terms of donation. But again, it's something that we speak about. Do you know what I mean? It's something that we openly speak about. And I think they can see, actually, there has been no implications for me. I'm still living a very healthy life. You know, I'm more active now than what I was before, actually, but I think that's more out of the decisions and the choices that I made about, I've got one kidney, I need to make sure that I'm looking after that one kidney. So yeah, so I think there has been, I think even like my nieces and nephews, although my brother wasn't able to donate, that's in their heads as well. They're both quite young, but again, already started that education at, you know, my niece is 17, my nephew's 18. So again, some of those conversations about organ donation have already started even with them. My daughter's only 10, but again, I've started having those conversations with her, but trying to instill it at a young age that how important it is, because by donating you can save someone's life. And in my kind of eyes, you know, I've tried to kind of feed that in, not just by speaking at some of these things, but I'm involved with the Rotary Club of Organ Donation for UK as well. So I'm president-elect there, so I'm quite keen to try and get that message out, to try and educate and try and break down some of those barriers. But I think the response I've had from family now is probably much more positive than it was before.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think my dad's had some of that reassurance as well, that actually it was the right decision. Even though he probably was telling me at that point, no, don't do it, you're putting your life at risk, you're doing this, you're doing that. But in the end, it was the right decision for us as a family.
And how has that experience shaped you emotionally, physically, or even how you see your own identity?
I suppose it's changed me as a person, because until I was kind of faced with it head on, organ donation wouldn't have been something, I suppose, like I'm saying, when I was really little, when my grandfather passed away, so we never spoke about organ donation, so it was never an option back then. So it opened my eyes into an arena that I knew nothing about, but I actually went away and did lots of research. I suppose it gave my dad a new lease for life. It gave me a new lease for life as well. Do you know what I mean? So we celebrate my dad's birthday twice. So he has his birth date, and then we have his transplant date. We celebrate that. We make that into a big occasion. And he's doing things now. He'd kind of, while obviously during COVID and pre-COVID, he'd kind of disengaged in a lot of things, but he's now proactively getting involved in more groups. He's proactively he did his first 5K walk a few weeks, probably 3 or 4 months ago. But again, this is all as a result of this. So I can truly see the difference. And for me, it's changed our lives, do you know what I mean? Because again, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking about organ donation if it wasn't for that experience. And I suppose I want to go out there and advocate and promote it because it's so important, especially in the South Asian community. I'm really keen to get that voice out there and give people those informed choices that they can make themselves about the reasons for donating and the good reasons for donating. So yeah.
I think I love the fact that your dad has 2 birthdays and celebrating the success of the donation is so important as well. So Ekta, thank you so much for
Thank you.
not just sharing your story, but for all that you have done and continue to do in this space as well. And congratulations on your forthcoming role as president elect as well. Now is an opportunity. We don't have a huge amount of time, but an opportunity for people to ask questions. You've listened to us, and now is an opportunity for us to answer some of your questions. I think we've got a couple of questions I can certainly see, but I think Binita is looking in the chat box for questions as well. There is one from Kirit Mystery. Good to see you, Kirit. Who's asked a question about joining up efforts and working in a collaborative way to remove some of the competition that may exist in this space as well. So I will pose that question firstly to Mahmud, if that's okay. Mahmud, have you got any views on how do we join up our efforts?
Yeah, it's I recognise it as well, Kirit. I think everyone's trying to do the right thing, but by everyone trying to do the right thing, you get a lot of people trying to do the right thing in small ways rather than amplifying this in the biggest way possible. I don't know. It's probably more a question for South Asian Heritage Month are doing this. APNA, Pam knows we've had conversations about organising events on this. NHSBT have a big focus on this as well. The Rotary Club, as well as you've said, Ekta, and obviously Kirit, you're doing things too. So I absolutely recognise the challenge. I guess I'm a bit more pragmatic. I'd rather a lot of us did lots of things than people did nothing, but I definitely agree there's an opportunity to join it up. How that's best done and who best coordinates is probably the harder question, isn't it, Kirit? So I'm pretty sure you don't know the answer either, but I do agree it's worth maybe those sort of 4, 5, 6 organisations getting together, I would say, and seeing if there's an opportunity to amplify.
Thank you. Thank you, Mahmud.
I've got a question, Habib, if that's all right, if I may chime in. Yes. It's sort of over 25 years working in the NHS as a doctor. There's hardly any mention of it at all. So how do we get NHS organisations to take every opportunity to to ask the question and to have the conversation, because unless you work in ITU and it's part of your day job, no one else is talking about it. And how do we get people to care about something that won't affect them unless they, you know, they are in that situation you're in, Mahmud, just out the blue, they're in that situation. I know that's a really tricky question, but as the incoming chair of Sheffield Teaching Hospitals, there is an opportunity, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, my first gig, I think Karen, my organ donation committee chair, and someone that works in the trust actually runs our research side, Gertch, so might be someone you want to speak to. At Chesterfield Royal, my first gig was to help open our organ donation memorial in the trust, so it just felt quite poetic to become chair at Chesterfield Royal at that very moment. I think you're right, Binita. I think for me, the opportunity is health inequalities. So at the moment, tackling health inequalities for organ donation sits with essentially an acute trust's organ donation committee, whereas, as we all know, the rest of health inequalities sits with the ICBs in a much more structured way within the NHS infrastructure, rather than with an NHSBT alignment into the organ donation committees of just acute trusts. And I think therein lies the problem. And I think if we can make this, and I know, Habib, you've tried very hard through the work you've done in the Race and Health Observatory to highlight the very clear health inequality that we have, the half the consent rate that we see for ethnic minority donors versus white donors. I think if we can make this a health inequality that is mainstream through our standard way of looking at health inequalities, I think we've got a better chance of making this core for every NHS trust in a more structured way.
And there's a lot more that we can do and we will do, Mahmud, on that as well. And the opportunities that we have with the new health plan and the reorganization of the healthcare system. So I want to just on that point, a question to Gertch first, and then kind of a subsequent one to Ekta, around the importance we saw during COVID, I guess, of the messenger. So community leaders, faith leaders, your local GP or community pharmacists that you've known for a very long time, their role in getting the message out. How important is that, Gertch, do you think? Looking at the data that we have, particularly around, trust and building levels of confidence within communities.
Yeah, there's really important question. So time didn't permit, but I would have happily shared data from a pilot study we ran looking at the impact of GP practices and organ donation registration. And I was really surprised, which doesn't happen to me very often. But 30% of patients in this trial, after having a conversation with their GP, then went on to sign up on the organ donation register, which, if you think about how many daily appointments there are in this country, that's pretty phenomenal figure. So I think trusted spaces are really important. But that's why I would go back to, I guess it's Kirit's question as well, about we're investing significant resource in things like the community grants program. So there are numerous projects across the country. And I think the next logical step of that journey is to now step back and reflect on what's worked well, why it's worked well, and let's learn from that so that we're strategic on the next set of community grants programs, so that we do all collaborate in a strategic way.
That's so important, Gertch, and we have the opportunities hopefully now to do that as well. So the final question, Ekta, before we hand back to Binita to close the webinar. Ekta, what would you say to someone who's considering being a donor but feels hesitant or afraid?
I think what I would say is think of the gift of life that you're giving that person, and potentially knowing that one day, at some point, we all may need a kidney, or we all may need an organ donation, or someone you love may need it. So I suppose that's the conversations I've had with my children and my niece and nephew, the importance of it. You could save one life, you could save many lives through that one donation, like Mahmoud's wife did. you know, it's once you're gone, I suppose, the organs, no one's going to know if you've been, once you've got your clothes on, and you're, I suppose for me, it's a gift. I saw it as a gift from my father, and I can really truly see the benefits that that gift has had on him and our lives. I suppose for us, it's that he's still here for a wee bit longer, more than anything else. How long, I don't know. And if his time is tomorrow or it's another 10 years, I've been part of that process to keep him here for a wee bit longer. And I'm sure even as part of that, my dad would be happy to have that conversation as well. So yeah, it's a gift that you're able to give, a gift that means more than anything else to anyone else, I think.
Thank you so much. Ekta, Gurch, Mahmud, amazing, inspirational people. Thank you for all that you do. And on that note, I'll hand back to Binita to close the session. Sorry,
Yeah.
Binita, I haven't left you a huge amount of time.
No, it's fine. I literally just want to extend my thanks and echo what you've just said. Huge thanks to our speakers. These are not easy topics to talk about so eloquently. And to yourself, Habib, for chairing. Really, really appreciated. I think, you know, everyone on the call, just don't forget, have you been on to NHS, organdonation.nhs.uk? Have you registered your decision? Easy to forget about that. And then please just encourage as many of your family, friends, contacts to do the same, have that conversation. And just remember, still time to get involved in South Asian Heritage Month, and keep in touch with us if you're interested in following the campaign over the next 12 months. But thank you very much, and we'll say goodbye.